all the mysteries in dentistry and things that are kind of difficult for the average person to figure out, I feel like the bone grafting is a big one. Not a lot of people understand that there are different materials involved in that. I know you have a pretty cool backstory. So what his question was is, is there an end-all, be-all superior material? Is it a case-by-case thing? Different people do better with different materials. Kind of what's your outlook on that? And is there especially one to avoid?
Yes. So that is complex.
A lot of these are going to be.
Yeah. And this is going to, again, this is my opinion. So we're going to be going against what some people think, right? And I have different opinions than others, and
sure,
we all try to filter and acknowledge the research as much as we can and use that to help interpret and improve that, improve our practice. So I guess the first question is back to you is, what question are you, or what story are you referring to? Back when I was in residency and we went to the
correct
bank?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
I've always been fascinated by that story.
Yeah. So, all right. So when it comes to bone grafting, the first thing a person should know is that bone grafting is essentially kind of holding a space or a bookmark for a place to be used in the future, and you're trying to tell the bone and communicate it in a way that says, hey, later on we want to use this as bone, or we want to use it now, but like you could kind of hurry up and just become bone, please, right? Mm-hmm. And so all of your goals and aspirations and materials that you use are fought from a position of, I want to make this bone in the future. I want to tell the body that this needs to be that, right?
Sure.
And gum tissue grows, I'm going to screw this up, but it's somewhere in the order of 10 to 25 times faster than bone tissue.
Interesting.
And so what you get, if you just take a tooth out and you leave a hole, you will get a portion of that becomes saved by the clot and becomes bone eventually. But you'll also get what's called an invagination of the gum tissue, an ingrowth of gum tissue. Why does it invade there? Well, because it grows a lot faster and it's trying to find the other side. Gum tissue is very cool in that it's always trying to find a partner or a place to meet in the middle.
Right.
Also, reason why if you have stitches, the stitches are trying to get those wounds close together, so they say, oh, it's my buddy's right here, I can seal it up.
Yeah.
If you don't put the stitch in, it's got to do a lot of work to find it, and that's where you get extra scarring, etc.
Sure.
So when you're doing bone grafting, when you're trying to determine how you're going to communicate this message, generally you're looking at the hole that is there, okay? And the best way it was ever described to me is when, let's say you had a paper Dixie cup, right? And you need to fill that with water. Well, obviously a full intact cup can fill all the way with water, right?
Okay.
Perfect scenario for filling with water. Right. But if you cut a side or a corner of that off, right, like a strip out of it, it's only going to be able to hold water up until that point, right? Likewise, if you cut two sides, it's even worse at holding water because there's a lot more patching and repairing you have to do. Well, that's very similar to a bone socket. That's very similar to a tooth socket, rather. When you take a tooth out, it's not necessarily just this perfect hole. Sometimes the bone is a little bit weak and it breaks out, etc. And so sometimes you don't get that perfect Dixie cup.
Right.
And so a lot of our processes to bone graft or seal that up are made with the intention of getting sort of that Dixie cup full of water, okay? Bone grafting specifically doesn't have a lot of osteoinductive properties, okay? So osteoinductive means that bone forming, bone stimulating, okay?
Okay.
I'm blanking on the term, but there's osteoconductive, right? And that just means that it's hospitable to the growth. It's just not spurring it on. That's what bone has. Bone grafting, any type of grafting material, is mostly going to be osteoconductive, right? The one that spurs it on, we don't have a lot of research on yet. And there is a little bit that comes along with grafting with cadaver bone and the way it's treated to expose certain proteins that give signals to help stimulate this bone growth.
Okay.
But it's mostly just there as a space maintainer, as a boxing out. Think of it like a basketball player. You heard the term boxing out.
Yeah.
It's just saying like, hey, that's my space, right? And so when you put bone graft in, it has to be really good at holding the space open for the blood to flow in and turn into bone. Mm-hmm. It also needs to be really good at breaking down and becoming what you want it to be.
Right.
Otherwise, it's going to stay that long term.
Okay.
So when you look at selecting bone graft and you're going to put it in this hole to build up the space, the less substance that your Dixie cup has, the more substance you have to provide, the stronger the material that you have to provide.
Okay.
So let's just take bovine bone. Bovine bone is from a cow. It's processed in a very similar way as a human bone. And when bone graft is processed, it's generally going to sort of just be reduced to its mineral content, right? And cow bone is very, very, very dense. It's very hard to flip over, okay? So you're going to put that in there, and it will, by and large, stay and be that bovine bone for a really, really, really long time.
Okay.
Well, that may sound awesome because when you put an implant in, it's going to look like it's perfect. But it's not really functioning like bone. It just kind of looks like there's bone there, right? And so we can use it almost as like a deceptive technique to be like, oh, yeah, there's bone there, right? There is use for it, right? It provides structure. It provides that maintenance, that boxing out of the space. And it is important. And I use it in a lot of my sinuses. It's such a great material. But it's not perfect for everything. We want to stimulate bone in that area. I don't want my whole entire implant to be surrounded by that because we can't verify until we see a big problem that ever turned into bone. It just looks like it did. Okay.
Interesting.
On the other spectrum, there's it's called DFDBA, which is demineralized freeze-dried bone allograft. Okay, and that's essentially they wipe out almost all the minerals. Okay, it's basically just a matrix of collagen, and it's very squishable. If you put it in a box and you squished it, it would give you a lot of space that you could squish it.
Mm-hmm. And is this like synthetic bone graft?
This is I'm sorry. Yes, this is a cadaver bone. This is cadaver bone.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
So cadaver bone in the DFDBA doesn't have a lot of the space maintenance, so it's not boxing out, right? And so if you put a lot of pressure on it, you're going to get a lot of dieback off of it because it's not really holding its own presence. An example of where you would want to use that would be maybe a perfect socket that is already its own perfect Dixie cup and you want it to heal maybe a little bit faster. Maybe you're using something as an additive like a growth hormone or some sort of growth stimulating material. That would be a good host, like a sponge, to deliver that product into that bone area, into that blood clot. Okay. So where's the sweet spot? Well, the sweet spot and what I use is not demineralized. So it's not the bone missing its mineral content. It's actually cadaver bone, and it's sort of 70% of the outer shell of a cadaver bone and then 30% of the inner shell. And it's sort of this nice mix where we get some good space maintenance and we get some changeover. We just kind of get good results with it, right? And we know it's going to turn into our own bone. It's usually around 6 months or so. Okay. All that being said, with bone grafting, when I'm looking at a space, I'm looking at it to say, can I grow bone there? What type of boxing out do I need? And how much of it do I need in that space as well, right? And is this an area that's so bad that I need to wait and let that bone grow and heal in there before putting that implant in, right? That answer obviously is very tricky. It's hard for me to even explain on that level, right? Or try to simplify it. But the take home is if I come to a spot and I say, whoa, that needs that much work, right? That I'm going to have to wait. Generally, I'll find another spot. The goal that you're after, that you're trying to dig out of this person's jaw, is finding spots that are held by the bone that's already present and already healthy.
Right.
You want this as an additive measure. Now, when it comes to bone grafting, because I'm looking for those natural spaces and because I've done a bazillion of them, I can kind of see where I need to be putting them rather than finding out later and going, oh crap, I need to put a bone graft there, right? This is where some of the confusion comes, because if you don't have somebody that's doing that, they might say, well, I see hole I need to put here, right? When you put it in there, then you're going to create a bunch of problems where you need grafting, etc. So I'm trying to avoid that day one or minute one. But one added benefit that we have in full arch is that once that structure is there with the implants seated in the jaw and the structure, the superstructure, the denture is screwed in on top of that, we now have a nice, perfectly secured umbrella, right? And that umbrella also does part of the job of boxing out.
Right.
So in hybrid dentistry, you're a little bit cheating for bone grafting, which, to go another layer further, a lot of patients that come in and have been pitched on a lot of bone grafting, it's not that it wouldn't ever need to be done, but you're showing your experience by over prescribing bone grafting, because you don't know how much you can rely on with that hybrid denture, and you don't know how to readjust where to put those positions, those implant positions, right? So you're kind of saying, well, I don't really know, so I'm just going to blanket fill all these holes and hope that it comes out with enough.
Right.
And so that's sort of an uphill battle that I face every day, because a lot of times I'll say, well, you don't need any bone grafting, and we'll come in on a patient who's already seen someone and been told they need extensive work and 20 grand worth of bone grafting.
Right.
Well, yeah, there's a little bit of practitioner difference there, but there's also some experience difference there. And, price transparency is a big thing for us. We don't really care if we end up putting bone graft or anything in. We don't really ever charge extra for it. But for a lot of places, that's like the add-on. That's the tire service that you can sell the patient on once they've already committed to the car.
Sure.
And so you'll see it overprescribed, one, from lack of experience, and you'll see it overprescribed from a financial position as well.
Yeah.
My approach has always been, look, I don't really care if this costs me $500 in materials. If it costs me $0 in materials, we're going to find the space that is most appropriate for this patient. That's the most host natural bone to them. And if there's holes that I'm concerned about not being able to hold the space, then we're going to put it in there.